All right, everybody, pack up your whips and your hats and your adult diapers, because we're time to go on a Indiana Jones adventure once again, and on the next episode of YumChunks, the After the Credits podcast. Welcome, everybody. Sean, play the music.
Dun, 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 dun.
No, not that. No, the other music. I just recorded a cold open.
Oh.
It's time to ham up.
Oh, I gotta really try hard.
Shut it down!
Somehow it's the best.
After the credits.
A YumChunks podcast.
YumChunks!
That was our movie cold open. We were on a train and in a Chinese nightclub and in an Amazon cave.
Right, and Area 51.
And
I know Indiana Jones things. It's fine. Welcome, listeners, to episode 123 of After the Credits, the YumChunks podcast. I am one of your hosts, Matt Shuey. Today we have Sean Davis. Hey, Sean.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
And Ryan Davis, I think you're here, yeah?
Yeah, I'm all ready to go. I got my whip, my adult diapers. I'm all diped up and ready to go.
All diped up and ready to go. That's a song, right? I'm all diped up and ready to go. What song am I thinking of?
That's you're thinking of our theme song.
Yeah.
It is now.
Yeah.
Take that sample of me singing that and get somebody to put a beat underneath it.
Well, as our special guest from last episode, Kev is in music school. Kev, if you want to turn that sample into some assignment, some project, have at it. Just go wild with it, man.
Buck wild. All right. So, tonight we're going to be talking about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, the fifth entry in the Indiana Jones series. How much longer could Harrison Ford possibly live? Find out tonight and more.
We're going to decide how long he could possibly live. We place judgment. I like to think we place judgment on people's lives. I'm okay. And I'm not only just okay with that.
No, I think what Matt's saying is that we will judge him and then decide when we kill him. So we do determine how long he lives.
Sean, how many more things are we going to have to explain to you tonight?
That and time travel.
Okay.
Spoilers, I guess.
I don't want to. Oh, God. Why did they do this to us? Look, I love a good time travel story, but I kind of love and both also hate talking about it afterwards. But that's what we're here to do.
Yeah. I mean, that's just a good summary of your relationship with this podcast, with all of our relationships with this podcast. Especially the listeners.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, no one's forcing you to listen. No one's forcing us to do this. And no one's forcing us to unload all of our chunks into our big pyre, but we're going to do it anyway. And so for today, I'd like to start off the sharing of the Chunkfire Stories with, who should I pick? I'm aiming my rifles at both of you, and I'm switching back and forth.
Why do you have to shoot either of us?
All right, Ryan, shoot. Go.
Okay. Well, I watched just a couple movies on Netflix. The first is the sequel to that Chris Hemsworth movie from a few years back, Extraction. This is Extraction 2. The Extractioning. Anyway.
More extractions.
Yeah.
Also, can we sue them, Ryan?
Yes, we can. We can. This is actually a sequel to the hit board game that Shona and I are developing.
Yeah. Oh, all right.
Yeah. But they're similar in the sense that our game stars Chris Hemsworth.
Yes.
If a board game can star a celebrity, yeah.
He plays the role of the dice.
Yes. Well, anyway, if you've seen the first Extraction, you know what you're in for. It's an action flick. It's a little bit smarter than the average action movie. Some quick snappy, good editing, action, and somewhat akin to, say, John Wick, except for more like military-ish, so like more gear and less, suits. Yeah,
Is that gear as bulletproof as the suits?
Oh yeah, he's getting
Okay.
beat up far beyond any mortal can handle. But yeah. So anyway, it's more of that. But it really does have a good sense of like feeling like you're in a video game. I think in all the right ways and all the good ways that don't make us cringe sometimes when we watch these sorts of movies. Like you, not to, I mean, spoilers, but I mean, I would say 50% of the movie actually is action, which is a pretty good percentage if you think about it. Yeah, and it is pretty good. It can be kind of schlocky sometimes, but overall, I'd give it a recommend if you're just in for the mood of a pretty rough and tumble action flick with Chris Hemsworth. That's it's a recommend for those who know what they're in for. And then the other movie I watched is this old movie that came out long ago, starring Adam Driver, called 65. It came out a full 4 months ago, and it's already made its way to Netflix. And
man, that took a while.
I forgot about that film.
Yeah, so did I, until it popped up and said, I exist, watch me. And I said, okay. I think you probably all know what this movie's about if you've seen a trailer for it. It is Adam Driver fighting dinosaurs. That is what this is.
I remember being kind of excited for it before it came out, and then came out and it they didn't allow people to go see it or something because no one saw it.
No one saw it. Which maybe they were doing, it was like a humanitarian service that they stopped people from seeing it, so can't blame them. Yeah, it's not good. There's really not a whole lot to say about this movie. There's very little dialogue because it is just two humans, or humanoids, whatever. I don't know. There's some sort of lore to this movie. Actually, not really. They're like they're like long and in a galaxy far, far away, whatever. They're non-Earthlings on Earth 65 million years in the past where there's dinosaurs. And every dinosaur on the planet wants to kill Adam Driver. And for whatever reason, they decided to make the two main characters not speak the same language. Sort of a spoiler. So now what would already be very little dialogue between just two speaking characters, there's now none. So it's quite a mystery. Anyway, the movie's super bad. Don't watch it.
I mean, the premise reminded me, or maybe not the premise, but the trailers made me think, give me Planet of the Apes vibes, right? On a planet with it. But maybe not.
I was sort of thinking that there might be some little twist in there, maybe something a little too obvious of a twist, maybe something like Battlestar Galactica. But anyway, none of that is dumb. Anyway, so...
Well, I'll go watch it. I'm going to watch that over Extraction. Actually,
yeah.
That's not true. I haven't seen the first Extraction, so that 65 has the leg up on that.
Yeah, it does. I guess maybe one good note I can say about it is, while the technology in the movie isn't sort of is subtle, it's just kind of Adam Driver is just using the technology naturally. It's not like some special thing. You know what I mean? Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. In a lot of science fiction, you're like, ooh, I'm revealing this sci-fi super fancy device, and be amazed. It's kind of, it felt like kind of almost like an afterthought, but it's still obviously advanced technology because they're a spacefaring race. Anyway, but yeah, so if you're in for approximately 2 hours of Adam Driver just grunting and yelling and just being in excruciating pain, that's for you.
I mean, I thought you said the movie was bad. You just described the perfect movie. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. But anyway, that's all the chunks I got. Matt, shall I hand it back to you?
Oh, yeah, I got this. I caught it. All right. I saw a couple movies too. And I'm going through my Regal app to remember them. It says something about the movies. All right. I saw The Boogeyman. And I saw The Boogeyman because I had one of our cars in the shop. So I was getting a one of those recall notices you get for the dealer, and they do it for free. So I Ubered over to the movie theater, and that was the only movie that was playing at the right time in the right time frame. So I went, okay, well, I've got Regal Unlimited, so I'll check it out. And it is, I don't know, there's not really anything to say about it. It was just a cookie cutter haunted house movie. C-. All right. And I also saw the movie No Hard Feelings. This is a comedy starring Jennifer Lawrence, and the premise is that she lives in, what is it? It's Montauk, and so it's set up against this whole like rich people are gentrifying this area, and she's gonna lose her house or whatever. I don't know. She's got financial troubles, and this rich couple, one of them is Matthew Broderick, who's looking really old. But this rich couple has like a 19-year-old son. She's like 35, by the way. That's important. But he's awkward and just doesn't have friends and plays video games all day or whatever. So they pay her to be his girlfriend, so that when he goes to college, he will have had a girlfriend and won't be awkward. And she's like, wait, so am I supposed to, like, you know? And they're like, we'll leave that up to you. So that's, like, the plot of the movie. And, yeah, it's weird. I felt weird watching it.
Well, I could chime in because that was going to be... I've also seen this and was going to mention it. But, yeah, I mean, I agree. It's kind of weird. And I think it's, you know, it's intentionally kind of supposed to be like that. I don't know.
It's aware of it.
Yeah, it's aware of it. Overall, I generally enjoyed it. I thought it was... I didn't think it was great. I got a couple chuckles out of it here and there. And there's a couple moments and scenes that were actually kind of touching. And I thought, like, oh, that was actually really just a good scene. I was kind of expecting more rated R raunchiness, though.
Yeah,
There's a couple key sequences. But other than that, it's actually... It reminded me like an 80s or 90s, like... rom-comish, kind of like very much more like good-spirited like teen comedy. Like I'm trying to think, there's like a movie in the 80s where like a kid is pretending to be someone else, dating this guy, and then they find out, like, you know, like a, I don't know, she's all that kind of thing, you know.
Yeah, it felt somewhere between one of those kind of teen comedies and also like a summer coming of age movie.
Yeah.
And it felt like it was more the former for the first half and more the latter for the second half. Like it feels like by the end it really mellows out and kind of drops this whole facade of it being this like raunchy, crazy movie.
Yeah, and like halfway through the film, it's just like, oh, now they're just like two normal people. Like after that, like kind of first date, or you know, the first sequence where things are kind of crazy. Then it's just like, oh, okay, now there's obviously other issues going on, but it's like, oh, now they're just normal people. And
right. Yeah, I as uncomfortable as I was for many parts of the movie, I did also enjoy it. And I did get a lot of good laughs out of it. And you know, I have a soft spot for coming of age movies, so so I thought it was fun. But yeah, it's the premise is a bit of a sell. So if you can get past that, then I would say it's a recommend. I don't think that the movie goes too far.
No, I don't think so.
But I think that your mileage will vary. So
yeah, I think some people will probably actually want it to go further because, like, ooh, this is it's billed as this R-rated crazy comedy, and it really isn't that. At least not my opinion. Some things kind of sometimes are, but overall, it's a very, you know, movie with a touching message and themes and characters and stuff. That scene in the restaurant I thought that scene was awesome. Just like as a scene, like aside from the context of this movie, You know, seeing what I'm talking about? Like when he's playing the piano and stuff.
Oh, yes, that was a good scene.
That was a great scene. So.
I guess, yeah, you said it is that, like, it doesn't, like, yeah, there are people who are going to go see this and wish that it was more extreme, and the people who don't want that, or realize, like, oh, it's not actually that extreme, are already going to be turned off by the premise.
Yeah,
so
that's true,
it's kind of exists in this weird in-between zone. So, yeah, but, yeah, I enjoyed that. Aside from those movies, let's see, it's summer, so I've been working a summer concert series at the theater where I work. Bunch of cover bands. We and I was follow spot for all of these, which is great because it's like, it barely feels like work. I get paid to watch a concert, and then I go home and I don't feel like I went to work. And then a couple weeks later, I get a paycheck, and I go, oh, where'd this money come from? So I worked, in a period of about a week, I worked a Rolling Stones cover band, the Oingo Boingo cover band, Dead Man's Party, like, because I think they're pretty prolific. Ryan, I'm sure you've seen them before.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
This was my second time seeing them. A Jimmy Buffett cover band. I learned that I don't like Jimmy Buffett's music. Queen Nation, which is the Queen cover band, and then a band called the Cassie B Project, which is basically just a house band, but I worked that one because it was for the 4th of July, and our theater, the Moonlight, is where our city does their yearly fireworks at that park. And so people get to that park and they camp out like at 7 a.m. all day to have a place to watch the fireworks from. So they usually hold a concert, and they basically just play pop hits from like the 90s and onward. So, it's a mix of a whole bunch of different types of genres for, something for everybody. So those were fun. I would say that I think that Queen Nation probably was the best performance. I would say I probably liked Dead Man's Party the most. Because I'd seen them, I already knew I was going to enjoy that, and I really had that a lot of fun with that. And so the last thing I have to thank Sean, your friend, and frequent writer emailer of the podcast, Brian Ridloff. A few months ago, he messaged me out of the blue and said, I know you like musicals. I'm trying to get rid of some tickets for Six the Musical. And he sold them to me at a very, very good price. And very good seats. I was surprised how good of seats they were. So my wife Maeve and I, we went to see this, and her mom, my mother-in-law Kim, is a big fan of the subject matter. When we told her we were going, we looked for a ticket for her too, so the three of us went to go see it. It is about the 6 wives of Henry VIII, the Tudors, but it is, which is, by the way, a subject I'm not at all interested in. But by my mother-in-law, it's like one of her favorite pieces of history to study. It's like one of her favorite historical things. So on the way there, in the car ride, she gave me like a rundown of like, okay, here's all the important historical points and parts of here's what each of these characters are about. So Henry VIII had 6 wives, and some of them died, some of them got divorced and whatnot, and they had this whole thing. And the show is presented as a modern pop concert, and all of the queens are presented as pop stars. And each one of them takes inspiration from actual pop stars. For instance, there's one who's supposed to be like Adele, Celine Dion. There's one who's supposed to be like a Lizzo, Cardi B, Missy Elliott type. There's one who's very Britney Spears, Ariana Grande, etc. And so the whole thing is framed as an American Idol style contest where they sing songs about their lives and try to determine who had the worst life, who was the most mistreated by Henry VIII. And it was really good. It was a lot of fun. It sounds
like a really interesting, awesome premise.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. The songs were very catchy, very upbeat. As a tech person, specifically as a lighting person, I thought the lighting design was phenomenal. in a way in which like the choreography was very, very active. It was very tight. It was very clean, and it was very energetic. And the lighting design is perfectly synced to it, to the point where like you could only see something like this in professional theater, because like they'll have very precise light cues that have to line up with very precise movements on stage. Characters have to stand in the exact right spot at the exact right time in order for lights to hit them in the perfect sequence. And I only noticed like maybe one or two times where it didn't perfectly work. And so I was really impressed on a technical level, but also just, it was so much fun. We were in such a frenzy by the end of the show, that we were riding high on the endorphins. We bought season tickets for Broadway San Diego. So now
Brian was a plant all along.
Yeah, he
works
did it.
For big
works
theater
for them.
in San Diego.
Yes. Yeah, he LOL'd when I told him that.
Also, thanks for the offer tickets, Brian. I thought we were
Oh.
friends.
Jeez.
I get
Wow.
it.
Did I just out him? Oh no, I didn't mean to. Brian, please.
It's too late now.
Don't be mad at me. Please offer me your tickets next time you actually. Please. That was so much fun. Okay, so I have tickets for. Let me get in my account.
What theater is Broadway? Like
Broadway San Diego operates out of the San Diego Civic Theater.
Oh, it is the Civic Theater. Okay.
Yeah. It's just the company that they use to handle the Broadway touring shows for San Diego.
I mean, that's usually where when I see stuff in San Diego. It's at the Civic Theater. So.
Yeah, so I have tickets for, and this is over the next like 9 months. I have tickets for Les Mis and for Aladdin and The Wiz and Chicago and Mamma Mia and Beetlejuice, which I already had, and MJ the Musical and Mrs. Doubtfire the Musical, and there might be one other that I'm forgetting. How many was that?
It was like 8 maybe or something. So.
Okay. And so I'm excited for that. And last bit is that my wife Maeve and I recently celebrated our 5th wedding anniversary. And so all these shows that we've been going to, all these awesome concerts and activities are all kind of part of a year-long celebration of that. So
that's awesome. That's
Wow.
cool. And you're welcome.
What are you talking? Oh, right, because Sean married us.
I'm glad to see I still got it.
You still got it. We are still married, and we have no one to thank for that but Sean Davis.
Exactly. No.
Yeah.
I do what I can, but I'm just happy that you're happy. But that's great.
Well,
that's cool. That's fun.
Sean, thank you. We couldn't have done this without you.
Yeah.
All of our successes as a married couple, we owe it all to you, Sean. And Sean, I'm gonna pass the chunk and stick over to you. I kind of talked longer than I was expecting to. I guess because we were talking about that Jennifer Lawrence movie.
We got in
and
some line too. So
I stole one of your chunks. So
that's
anyway,
all right.
one last thing, Brian. Thanks
Yes.
again. I really appreciate it. I loved the show. You totally undersold it. Like, I guess he didn't really tell me anything about it, but just a nice surprise. I didn't really care about the subject matter. I didn't know anything about the show, and it's great when you go into something like that and it blows you away. It's so.
Yeah.
Sean, what you got for us?
I just have one other film then that I've seen, and this was actually a recommend from again our special guest Kev from last episode. They recommended that was Past Lives. In theaters now. So I went and saw Past Lives. They did let me in, even though I was by myself. I didn't see it with anyone else.
Mm.
So that
What?
I got through on that because it's a perfect like date movie.
Oh,
And I asked if I could see it by myself, and
this is becoming
it was
sad.
It was sketchy. It was up in the air.
It's becoming
But I snuck
sadder
in.
and sadder by the moment.
I just pretended to be with this old.
How about you just
lady.
tell us about the movie?
I fell asleep through the movie.
Okay.
No. The movie was great. It was really good. It's a very, very simple, straightforward movie. It's just about kind of two kids, and their kind of lives and how they Their lives kind of come together and apart and stuff over the years. It's very good. It's an interesting film, not for any like big flashy crazy things, but it's like a film that like the more I was watching it, the more I was just like, I can't place my finger exactly on it, but like this film is like so reasonable. That's a funny way to describe it. It's just like, okay, so it's a romance, and so there's like scenes of like little cute like little interactions, and like they're kind of flirting and chemistry and stuff like that. But it's not like most Hollywood or most filmic romances in terms of how people act and the music swelling or having quirky music. It's just very, very normal. People are acting just normal the whole time, and it came across as very disarming. Just like, oh yeah, she's not acting like a weirdo psycho because that's how we assume people in romances act when they flirt. And she's not like, oh girl, what did you say to him? Like with her best friend, those cliches of how romances have to be. It's like, no, they're just normal people. Come on, people just act normal. Everyone's just very reasonable. It's just a very down to earth, very reasonable film, but is also very poignant and sad and happy and hopeful and tragic and just very touching overall. I definitely recommend. It's great. It's nothing but, like I said, it's not like a huge, big, boisterous movie, but it does, it hits you with the feels. So
okay, cool. Yeah, that was one I was looking at as a potentially to go see. So cool. If I can find a showtime, I would
recommend it. Definitely, recommend it. But that's all I got.
Okay. All right.
And I had one other thought. I know Queen Nation is the main. Why they should be called Princess?
Oh. Ryan, remember years ago we were talking about what if there were sequels to bands?
Oh, yeah.
What if you just made a band and called it Queen 2?
Why not?
Yeah, they should just be Queen 2.
Yeah.
Oh, I also forgot. I also follow spotted for a Fleetwood Mac / Stevie Nicks cover band as well, and they were good too.
Yeah, that sounds
I forgot to mention that one too. All right. Okay. Well, thank you. Those are some good chunks to get off our chests or shoulders, wherever we're storing them these days.
Oh, you don't even want to know.
I really don't want now. I don't want to know where those chunks have been.
That's why we have to burn them.
Goodness.
Anyways, what are we doing?
We're going to talk about Indiana Jones and the
right.
Kingdom of the Twisty Clock. So spoilers for that and for the Indiana Jones series as a whole, and also all of Hollywood. Probably, I don't know. I mean, we're in Disney.
We're just gonna drop random spoilers to anything. Just anything. Yep. Like if you're reading Pride and Prejudice, be wary. We might tell you what happens at the end. She ends up with Darcy. So sorry.
Yeah.
Oh man,
I am sorry about that. Spoilers for also historical events, right?
Spoilers for things that happened in history.
Yep.
For those of you who are in high school and haven't gotten to that chapter in your history class yet.
Yeah.
Man, they should totally pitch school and history class is like that'll get kids excited, right? Oh, you don't want to spoilers. Don't you want to know what's going to happen next?
I don't think that's going to work.
I think it could work, right? History and story are the same word.
Yeah.
Why don't we should treat history like it's like this story as opposed to open your history book? No, it should be like this narrative-driven drama that we want to. It'd get kids interested.
And we should start start doing setup and teases, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of World War I, the Allies won World War I, and the Axis powers, or were they the Axis powers in World War I? Whoever they were in World War I, they had to go through reparations and stuff. But we have a post-credit scene where young Hitler is coming out of the army from World War I, and that post-credit scene, it's going to lead to something. I mean, maybe that example was not in the greatest taste, but
no, but I see where you're going. That'd be kind of cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
History, more like her story. That's the thing they say in 6.
Oh, do they?
But don't let that dissuade you
I
from
do
seeing
want to see it now.
Yeah, that wasn't the greatest moment you could have shared, but
No. But, you know.
yeah, no, that's
All right.
okay. All right,
Well,
well,
regardless. Ryan, tell us what happened in this.
all right, let me give you the history of movie. Okay, so we're in the past, and even in Indy's past, we're doing a flashback as like we have done in the Last Crusaders of the Ark. Is that the name of the movie?
No.
Anyway, so it's 1940 something. It's like at the end of World War II, and Nazis are rampant. And Indiana Jones is here to save the day. But anyway, he and his friend, Old Professor Man, are captured by the Nazis, led by Mads Mikkelsen. And the Nazis think that they have found the fabled Lance of Longinus, but it turns out it's just a fake, so they're not able to start the third impact. So we won't be getting a human instrumentality project. But they do have the Antikythera, which is the ancient mathematical device used by Archimedes. And it's a big dial. Anyway, Mads Mikkelsen wants this device because of, well, to be honest, actually, at this point in the movie, I'm not sure why he wants it, but he wants it. Anyway, so Indiana Jones and his buddy escape with the dial, killing Mads Mikkelsen. Now flash forward to 1969. The moon landing has occurred, and Indiana Jones is an old man. He is disgruntled, divorced, and has a dead son. Played by Shia LaBeouf. He does not appear in this film. And he's doing his professor thing still, and he's retiring. It's his last day at work. And his goddaughter shows up, Helena, who is asking about the dial, and she wants it, the dial of destiny, as it were. So Indiana Jones, after talking a bunch, they go to the archives where he has it stored to fetch it. Then Mads Mikkelsen, tricked you, he wasn't dead, he's still alive, and has a bunch of goons ready to murder every civilian they find. And they do. And they attempt to steal the dial from Indiana Jones and Helena Shaw, but Helena Shaw gets away with it, leaving Indiana Jones to his doom. Chaos ensues. They all escape. Helena runs away to Morocco to sell the dial, because that's why she wanted it in the first place, is to sell it to make money. Indiana Jones pursues her there, as does Mads Mikkelsen and his gang. They're like in a black market deal thingamajig where Helena is trying to sell this dial to all these guys who know what it is and want it enough to spend millions of dollars on it. Indiana Jones shows up to thwart her, as does Mads, and a bunch of chaos ensues. There's a big chase, blah, blah, blah. But Mads this time gets away with it. Haha! But the dial is, in fact, broken into two parts, so he only has one part. And Indiana Jones has the jump on where he can get information on how to find the second half. So he goes to find Antonio Banderas, who takes him out to the sea to dive into a ship underwater where they think they can find information about the dial. They do this thing I just described and come back with this tablet that has information regarding where the dial is, but Mads Mikkelsen is awaiting them when they resurface from the diving expedition. He then they talk a bunch, and Indiana Jones and Helena escape, but not before Antonio Banderas gets killed. Helena Shaw, they run away, but Mads Mikkelsen is a genius tracker and uses his binoculars to watch them sail away and then pursues them. They arrive in Greece, which is where the tablet said to go, to the grave or the crypt of Archimedes. That's where his skeleton lays. Right, so they go through this cave and they do that thing. They find Archimedes' skeleton and find the second half of the dial, as well as a modern-looking wristwatch. What does this mean? So Mads, of course, shows up and ambushes them, steals the dial, combines the Triforce of Power, and is it now able to travel back in time. That he reveals this is his plan all along, that he's going to travel back in time and replace Hitler as a leader of Germany and win the war, presumably, as opposed to losing it. So he
Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah. So he flies on his plane, and the Dial of Destiny, or the Antikythera, points him towards where a rift in time is that allows him to fly his plane through. That should take him to 1939, according to his calculations, or something like that. But he takes Indiana Jones with him for reasons. And Indiana Jones points out, like, hey, your calculations are wrong. Archimedes didn't know about continental rift yet, because everything else, I'm sure, was perfect. So anyway, also Helena and their little kid buddy that they've had this whole time, I didn't mention, are pursuing them. The kid is in like a little biplane kind of deal, and Helena is stowed away aboard the ship, the plane. So anyway, they fly through the rift in time, the big airplane, the Nazi airplane, traveling back in time, as well as the little biplane. And they don't arrive in 1939. They arrived in some other date, BC. It's the siege of Syracuse. It's that exact moment in time that they arrive. This is actively going on. Right. So now you got this big old dumb Nazi plane flying around ancient Greece, and it is shot down by ballistas and such. And what else happens? They beat all the bad guys, right? Okay, that's fine. And then Indiana Jones also escapes with Helena with their lives, where they can then be rescued by the little kid in the biplane and then travel back. But a little thing to note here is that while Indiana Jones is on the ground in ancient Greece, he's like, "No, I'm going to stay here with Archimedes. He's my bud." And Helena says, "Nah, you're not." So she punches him and knocks him out and takes him back forcibly. Anyway, they arrive back in their modern day, I guess, 1969. And yeah, Indiana Jones, Marion arrives, and she's sad, and they have a moment, and they're still kind of sad, but not that sad. And the movie ends. How's that?
Wait a minute. What about the post-credit scene?
Oh yeah, post-credit scene.
Did you notice that one soldier is Hitler? He's cooking something.
I was gonna say something about that. They're like Hitler emerges from the sea or something. But yeah, that is the thing that happens.
Shia LaBeouf returns from the war with no memory.
Yes.
Yeah. But he's secretly Hitler?
I would have cheered if after the credits Shia LaBeouf showed up.
But it's just as like that YouTube video that was really popular like 10 years ago of him like doing the motivational thing in front of the green screen. They should have just used that footage in the movie.
In actual, yeah.
But then Indiana Jones has to go make an appointment to be on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial to talk to a bunch of little kids about his crazy adventures.
What are you referencing right now?
The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles.
Oh, I haven't watched.
You never watched that? Oh man, it's good. It's like the Sarah Connor Chronicles, if you think about it, in that they both contain the word chronicle.
Oh, I never thought of it that way.
Basically the same. Yeah, he's an old man, and all the framing of that is like he's an old man telling all these kids about his adventures. So we all knew he wasn't going to die in all of these movies. It ruined it.
What did we think about this movie?
I'll jump in. I generally liked it. I liked it with some big kind of like But it. The other thing is, I had rewatched all of the other ones every day, the week leading up to seeing this. So I went back and watched, Raiders and Doom and Crusade, and then Skull. So I had just watched Kingdom of the Crystal Skull the night before, and I think that's the perfect state of mind to watch anything, just in general, because it's gonna make it seem so much better. But yeah, I do think it's better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull for sure. Even though, if I'm being honest, on a rewatch, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, there were some things that I think are actually better, but then it turns into stuff that's far, far worse. Anyways, we're not talking about that movie. We're talking about this movie. And it was fine. It was good. I think biggest issue is that it was too long, and it was kind of... I think boring is too strong a word. It wasn't boring, but it felt very flat, maybe? I don't know if that's...
That's a good word.
Yep.
I'll mull that word over, see if that feels right. But I'll go, flat. Felt very flat. But there was still plenty of stuff I liked. I liked that they didn't... I didn't feel that they were so forcibly doing the whole... reference. There was some of it, obviously, but I was surprised that it wasn't more. And I like him. Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford, fine. They acknowledge he's an old man. He's an old man in this. It's about him being an old man. They're not pretending he's not an old man. So sure, I like Phoebe Waller-Bridge. I actually really like the ending a lot, the whole sequence. And there's other stuff throughout it, but overall, I wish it was like at least half an hour shorter. And I just still have issues with like the visual production of these more modern kind of remakes, or not remakes, but revisits, and other issues we'll get into. But overall, it was a fun adventure.
One term I've heard refer to things like this is a legacy sequel.
Yeah. So the look of these legacy sequels, and especially coming off of having just watched the originals. And this is definitely true. I think Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was worse than this in terms of what I'm going to talk about in the look. But compared to the original three, it's just so apparent that this doesn't have the look that I want in an Indiana Jones film. And I'm not saying that it was poor cinematography by any means, but something's missing. Anyways, but yeah, that's my broad stuff. Chewy, what do you think?
What do I think? Oh, gosh. Somewhere between it was pretty good and it was all right, I guess.
Nailed it.
And where exactly there, I'm still debating internally, and you guys will help me figure this out as we do in our little group therapy sessions that we call after the credits of the YumChunks podcast. And I'm like, did I like it because I liked it, or because it wasn't Crystal Skull? And that's the thing. It's like overall it's better. I do think, like you said, that Crystal Skull has there are elements of that movie that feel more tonally closer to the original three than this one does. This one has a little bit of an offbeat tone, in my opinion, and in moments that feels flat. I don't think that it felt too long. I will disagree with you there. I thought that the pacing for most of it was pretty tight. There were a couple moments where I'm like, all right, this scene is getting overindulgent. Let's fast forward a bit. But for the most part, I thought that the pace was fine. I really liked that the movie started off, well, not the flashback, but when we go to 1969, it's just Harrison Ford playing himself. He's just a crotchety, grumpy old man who doesn't want to be bothered and just doesn't want to go on another adventure. He just wants to drink all day and lounge around in his underwear and his pajamas and be grumpy. I thought that was a great place to start the movie off from. Like you were saying, it doesn't try to make any allusions or implications as anything else. I would say that this movie is better than it deserving being such a box office bomb than it is. I think reviews, Rotten Tomato wise, it's in the 60s, and I think that's fair. I think it's good. Yeah. It's passing. I can't see myself revisiting this very often, but I liked it. It was good. I had a good time. Ryan,
cool.
Ryan, tell us why we're wrong.
No, I mean, overall, it's pretty mid, as the kids say. I didn't have strong appeal. I mean, there's certain items I'll vocalize some opinions on that are maybe stronger than others, but overall, impression of the movie was just kind of like, okay, all right, that's fine. But like Sean, I also have big butts.
I like big butts.
Oh, you're gonna like these. And Matt, like you said, I think through this discussion, you'll help me figure some things out. I have some interesting, or not interesting, but I have some muddled thoughts on what kind of like some of the messaging is taking away, and I've been mulling it over for close to what has been 3 weeks now, 2 weeks. And I can't really decide where I land, so I'm hoping you guys can help my brain work better.
All right.
Yeah, and in terms of pacing, I would just in timing. I think the movie did feel long to me, but mostly just because the intro was so long. It was like a 30. Sorry, it was just like a 30-minute intro, and I was like, what? When are we getting to the movie? Like, is the whole thing gonna be this like prologue? So I think if that wasn't there, I would definitely feel like the movie was much tighter. But Matt, as you were saying, like what in the movie proper, I think the pacing was fairly well. It's just like there was already this huge just getting to that point. So the whole thing,
and it feels a lot like a prelude, and it feels very disconnected from the first, except for that like the half of the dial in the prologue is kind of an afterthought to what actually is going on.
Right,
which is the train fight. And Ryan, you and I love a good train fight.
I can't deny it. I did enjoy the action of that sequence.
Yeah, Indiana Jones is overdue for a real good train fight.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually Crusade is the only other time we get in the intro of it, and that is the closest to a train fight.
Sean, you rewatched the whole series before this, and I wanted to do that, but I didn't. There was no way I was going to have the time. I did, however, rewatch the Plinkett review of Crystal Skull.
Well, I actually have been meaning to go back and watch that.
It's one of my favorites. But this is for those who are listening and don't know. It's Red Letter Media. They do more like standard movie reviews now, but back in the day they used to do these reviews with this character, Mr. Plinkett, who's a crass old man who's also a serial killer who's reviewing like movies, like, just reviewing movies, and he did his Crystal Skull review. And when there's a couple things that I went in my mind that were very in the forefront of my mind, one of which being, okay, this is the first Disney Indiana Jones. Hopefully the last. But this is a Disney Indiana Jones. And when they did Force Awakens, which I know a lot of people have soured on now, but I still really like that movie. It really felt like somebody at Disney watched the Plinkett reviews and made a list of don't do this.
Yeah.
For Force Awakens, especially when they were doing all the promotional materials and stressing how many practical effects there were, how many rubber alien costumes. So that's why I wanted to watch it. I wanted to like refresh myself on their take. And so I watched this movie with like a mind of like, what are all the major criticisms? Like, okay, we don't want Indiana Jones to be old, right? That was a big point. And in this one, they lean into it, right? Indiana Jones needs to be more of a murderer. Okay, well, basically
not just him, but like everyone.
The point is that that Crystal Skull lost a lot of the grit that the original trilogy has. Cool. Yeah. There's a lot of people who are just shot point blank in cold blood in this movie. There's a lot more, and I'm not trying to sound like an insane murder maniac. I'm just saying that, like, tonally, that's what the first 3 movies established, and this one went back to that. There's a lot more murder and blood and gruesome things, right?
Well, I will have one note about that, but overall, yes, I agree.
Yeah, so, just going through, I do feel like there was an effort to go through and try to course correct. But I also feel like in doing so, it did kind of steal some of the flavor of this movie, which I think is why you were saying I liked that you called it flat, because it does feel like a little bit of the magic of Indiana Jones, a little bit of the what makes it was missing in this movie. Even though this is a technically better movie than Crystal Skull, I still think Crystal Skull feels more like an Indiana Jones movie. Even though that movie has some awful things in it.
I mean, it does. I kind of agree with that. I would maintain, though, it feels like a really bad Indiana Jones movie.
Yes, but it does feel like an Indiana Jones movie.
Well, not just that it feels like it is.
Yeah.
And this, while I agree it doesn't feel as much as an Indiana Jones film, it is definitely a better film as the general sense. So, yeah, that's a good point. I think that's a good way to kind of maybe summarize it.
See, so I guess what I'm saying here is I wish this movie were either better or worse.
Yes. So that
it's funny because I think Ryan, you said
I said the exact same thing. So talking about this movie being flat, at least so the Kingdom of Crystal Skull had higher highs, but way lower lows. So overall, I would say this movie averages out to be a much better film, but it just kind of doesn't go anywhere. It just kind of stays at the same level. Like there's some.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, that's.
I was going to say, like, one of the things they mentioned in the Blanket review is like he goes into this whole analysis about American politics and how there's like an anti-communism like an anti-red rally in Crystal Skull. And he's like, yeah, college students didn't really do that in the 50s. He's like, that was more of a late 60s, early 70s thing. And there's a motorcycle chase up against that. And then on this movie, like, okay, it is the late 60s, so they do the same thing. Yeah, there's a anti-Vietnam rally, and there's a chase sequence through it. It's like almost like they watched that review. And
I just for that sequence, I like that sequence a lot in this movie. I like that kind of chase sequence on the horse and stuff. It I think did a good job of walking the line, like, oh, he's an old man and running, but he's getting on a horse again, and feeling plausible in the way that Indiana Jones is always kind of like, just plausible, like, Uncharted level plausible and stuff. Right. But I like even like the silly moment of Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong in the parade. Like, it reminded me of, again, like him going to Hitler in Last Crusade and him signing his, like, I don't know, like those little quirky, funny moments that are kind of schlocky, but also that's kind of why they're supposed to be. Anyways, that sequence though, I thought it was a fun sequence. It was
a fun sequence, but I also, even though they kind of like said, okay, we're going to do this right, I think the motorcycle chase in Crystal Skull is a little bit more fun. And it's also, I think it's, it's just, there's little things where it's just like, I don't know, this is the diet version of Indiana Jones. Yeah. This is the low sodium version. I don't like it. It doesn't taste right. It's a little off.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
It's well made, but one of the ingredients has changed, and
it's less filling, right? It's like it's less robust. I don't know. Again, I mean, going back to everything we're kind of been circling around, it's a little more flat, but. And this kind of sometimes goes back to that old saying, like, oh, I'd rather a movie be bad than boring. And, we all say that. And part of me sometimes agrees with Matt with that. I don't know. In this case, though, I don't think this is boring. I'm not saying this film is boring.
Right, it's not.
It's not. But to that end, like, I don't know if I always agree with that. Sometimes I want, even if it's like, I don't know, like, if I know that they're doing setup payoff and it's well-written characters and plotting is better and the story makes more sense, even if it's not, there's not a tornado with sharks flying around it, that's because that's stupid and sucks and they're not doing it very well. I'm not going to claim that is not boring. It's bad though. I don't you know what I'm saying? Like, bad is not always better than boring, I guess is what I'm saying. And I think I'm just like kind of advocating for erring on the side of a little bit more boring in this case. I don't know, not that I need to advocate for anything like that, but I guess maybe where I'm a slightly ever the smidge more positive. Mm-hmm. Because again, I do think it's better than Crystal Skull, and I agree there are moments in Crystal Skull great, but I still would rather have this than Crystal Skull.
Yes.
Me personally.
That's another thing I was thinking about is it's the same thing I think about with Shrek 4. And I go, how well would Shrek 4 have been received if it were Shrek 3 and Shrek 3 didn't exist? Right?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Indiana Jones is now in a similar situation. I'm trying to put myself in the mindset of if this were the first return to Indiana Jones and Crystal Skull never existed, how would we feel about that? That's a hypothetical that we'll never know, but it's interesting. It's worth examining, I think.
Yeah. And I also don't necessarily begrudge, or if people would rather have those more crazy but ultimately pretty awful versions or something like that's fine too. I'm not saying like that's wrong per se. I think in this case, I kind of prefer this. And again, I don't want to flatten the discourse to say it's just boring, straight up boring, because it's not, and there are things that are good about it.
Well,
for its own sake.
I have another thing I want to address as far as it being flat or boring. It's that plotting wise, it's every Indiana Jones, it's every Uncharted, it's every Tomb Raider, even right down to the point where they're like, oh, they're going and doing the dive and getting the thing. Okay, the bad guys are going to be waiting for them when they get back.
Yeah.
Every single time. No, always. Always. There are like a dozen Tomb Raider games, and they all have that scene.
Yeah.
Every Uncharted game, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sean. But I'm pretty sure every Uncharted game does that scene at least once. And the thing is, it's like, I was talking about this with Maeve the other night. I cannot remember exactly the context. We were talking about how like Citizen Kane, like a modern day film student might watch that and go, "What's the big deal?" You know, and you have to kind of have a professor explain, oh, this was the first time they did this. This was the first time they did this, and this thing that you're looking at, you might not know is a special effects shot, etc. I was comparing that with Ocarina of Time, a game that I don't personally feel has aged well.
Yeah.
But it established, at the time, it was groundbreaking. It established a lot of norms, and I believe that other games have done what it did better now. Right, but you kind of have to have the context, and it's interesting to me that now Indiana Jones that set up that format is now like boring because it's following its own format because so many other things have now done it at this point. You know, and I think some of the flatness might be coming from just that. Like it's too iconic for its own good.
I think even in towards that point too, it's formulaic even for itself, but even like Temple of Doom, right? Even the second entry was already kind of bucking that trend, not bucking the trend, but it was like, I guess what I'm saying is that I don't think Indiana Jones needed to be formulaic, right? Like there's definitely similarities between Raiders and Last Crusade, but I feel like even within the original content, you know, it wasn't a treasure hunt in the same way. And I you know, Temple of Doom is not my favorite of the Indiana Jones, but I still appreciate it, and it still stands out. It's so wildly different for so many reasons than Raiders, than Crusade, right? And that's what I mean here is like, I wanted something like that. I'm not saying like the film had to be a bottle movie that takes place in one location and they had to come up with, although I don't know if you guys have ever heard, like George Lucas wanted one of them to be a haunted house film.
Yeah.
So like, and I'm not even saying that's good or bad, but right, that is like, oh, that is something completely different, and that could have sucked, but it would have felt like, oh, that's Indiana Jones in a different way, like Temple of Doom was Indiana Jones in a different way. And Crystal Skull, well, I think in most ways it wasn't different, but in a few ways it was different, and that's why I think it does stand out in the ways it does. And this, there are some things that are different, and I think those are the things that I liked about it, but overall, it did feel just like, yeah, okay, we know what's going to happen. We know that we've been on this journey before. And it doesn't mean that the journey's bad or boring, but it does lose a little something, right? That luster is lost a little bit.
It's retreading its own steps.
Yeah, like when I think about Indiana Jones, that we maybe could have gotten in an alternate reality where there wasn't a 40-year gap between movies or whatever it was. I'm imagining like he's a manager of adventure. He's going on all these different kinds of adventure, and we only got to originally see these three, and then some in the the Chronicles.
Yeah.
But I'm imagining, like he's not always just fighting Nazis, like, and that's one really a down point in this movie for me is that, oh, okay, I guess I misunderstood Indiana Jones. I guess he is a man that just fights Nazis. That is what he is.
Yeah, Crystal Skull, that's a really good point. Crystal Skull got a lot of flack for being weird, and for the record, I don't think Aliens and Indiana Jones is a bad idea. I think it's just as weird and interesting.
Possibly could work. Yes, I don't think it was done. I don't think it was done well.
I think it. No. I don't think it was at all. Yeah. But I do think it could definitely work.
I think it could work for sure.
I absolutely think it could work.
Yeah.
But because it didn't, and because a lot of people I think a lot of people think that aliens don't belong in Indiana Jones because they didn't do it well. I think that's the reason. I think they could make a good Indiana Jones movie with aliens, and people would like it and not criticize the fact that it had aliens. So, go ahead and say what you're going to say.
No, I don't disagree with that at all. I think, it's like we almost like formulate the causality after we see the result, right? It's like, well, Crystal Skull sucked. Why did it suck? Oh, you know what? It's because aliens don't belong in Indiana Jones. That's why.
Yeah, it's like Phantom Menace sucked. Why did it suck? Jar Jar Binks.
Right.
It's like no, that's not why.
You're using the symptoms. You're saying the symptoms are the cause of the sickness. Right. It's like no, you kind of got exactly what you said. It's the reverse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so to the point that I'm trying to make with this is that I do not fault the studio for wanting to play it safe after Crystal Skull. Right? That is the safe thing to do. Going back to Nazis. Going back to a cookie-cutter storyline, let's focus on not making it too out there and just making a very solid, competently made, well-put-together, entertaining movie, right?
Yeah.
And that, I think, is what they did. I think that was... I do think that was the smart move, but if you don't... if you're not willing to take...
Box office-wise, maybe not.
Well, that's the thing, is that... I'm going to get to that, but I think that if you're not willing to take risks... even if it is a competently made, well put together product, it's gonna come off flat to some degree.
Yeah, and I generally all agree with that, but I will say there's a couple things as we discuss. I don't want to paint the entire thing as a corporate play it safe, paint by numbers movie, because I don't think that, first off, but I also think that it's a little bit diminishing. Because I do think there are some things, while maybe not like wildly crazy, I do think that were kind of risky or interesting or unique or unexpected. And elements of it that I do think, and maybe this is going to get into what you were thinking about, Ryan, like what were they doing? Why were they trying to do this? And I don't know if I have answers to that, but I do think it wasn't something like James Mangold is just like, he's a good director, right? Yeah. We all love Logan. And so I don't think he's just coming in here to get a paycheck. I do think he was coming in here to make a great movie and as well as he could, and some things are safe, and I think the stuff that to me is the most obvious is just in terms of the structure of the film, the plotting, the everything we've talked about. But like we're in places in Europe. There's a chase. There's another chase in a Europe kind of Middle Eastern style thing. They go to some ancient ruins, and again, I like this stuff, but it just, I don't know, like, I want a little bit of a break in the formula. I would love to the midpoint of this movie to completely take a hard 180 into something completely like, oh, apparently Archimedes, I don't know, he went to the Antarctic. I don't know, that's stupid, right? It's not just about the setting. But you know what I mean? Like, sure. I don't know, something
some
like
kind of
that.
Wild twist, yeah.
It was just like, oh, yeah, we've been around the Mediterranean a lot in these movies, and there's always stuff in Italy and Greece areas, and there's always stuff in the Middle East that they're going to, and so it just felt in that way, just like safe, if that.
In a lot of ways, it felt safe. Yeah, absolutely. Just real quick, I have to say this. When I was talking about Citizen Kane and Ocarina of Time earlier, Maeve texted me. She said, we were discussing what we were calling the Citizen Kane effect. And that idea that when something's so good, it inspires a whole bunch of other, creators down the line to the point where we don't know why it was good in the first place. So we want to get the term the Citizen Kane effect to stick online. We're trying to invent that. We're trying to make that happen.
Oh, okay.
So,
there you go.
That's what we're calling it. We're calling it the Citizen Kane effect. You heard it here first. I'm using that term correctly this time. All right? You heard it here first.
As opposed to every other time we've said that.
Yes. I think it might be the only time we're using it correctly. It's that. Okay.
Cool.
Sorry. Yeah. So let's. Can I bring up? Is there anything more to say about what we were just talking? I know I just derailed this.
No, that's a good transition point.
So how do you feel? How do you feel about time travel in Indiana Jones? How do you feel it was handled? Did you like it? Did you not?
Like I said, the ending to me actually was one of the highlights for sure. I liked it. I thought it was great. I think that last climactic sequence that's the kind of stuff I wanted more throughout the rest of the film. Like that's the kind of stuff when we were talking about earlier that kind of was like, whoa, they're doing that was out there and it feels like unique and something we haven't seen before. And just how like schlocky it was, but like not like bad, just like a World War II Nazi fighter plane shooting down Greek, battleships and catapults. I don't know. And they actually went there. They actually went to a different time zone. And I don't know. There were some things that I wish they maybe did slightly differently. I thought the villain death was kind of disappointing. Like Mads Mikkelsen is just like, well, he dies in a plane crash. Okay, I guess. Like, especially for like, these movies are known for the villains like dying horribly in gruesome ways, and we didn't get anything like that. But overall, I was into the ending for the most part, with small little things.
Ryan, how did you feel about it?
I think I was okay with the concept of time travel in an Indiana Jones movie, and partly maybe because of what I was just saying about aliens, right? Like maybe Crystal Skull did a good job in kind of opening my biases up to say like, yeah, Indiana Jones can be whatever. I mean, heck, we've had, it's not like anything's that precious in terms of the supernatural in terms of Indiana Jones. I mean, Temple of Doom is pretty wonky, right? So I'm okay, like I said, I'm okay with aliens, I'm okay with time travel. The way they did it was probably the fact that they did it and the way that they did it were probably the most interesting parts of the movie. It was pretty wild that we had this giant World War II plane flying around, I guess it was Italy. I said Greece originally, but whatever it was. Yeah. And it was pretty hokey and schlocky, and there was some parts where I was just like, "What? Does this make sense?" Like the fact that the operatives that were working with Mads aboard the plane were just like shooting their pistols down at the boats. Like, what are you doing? Like, what do you think you're accomplishing? Do you even know?
I feel like Indy even says, what are you doing?
It's just like a bizarre thing to like, is it that they're trying to like characterize those people that are just like, yeah, we don't care. We're just going to shoot everyone. I didn't understand it. It didn't make sense to me. And also it took that plane half an hour to fly across a bay that was 100 feet long. It cut back and forth between the plane like 10 different times. Like, do they not know how fast planes travel? That's that Spielbergian.
It's
the
editing.
Spielberg, it's the Spielbergian effect.
And so I'm all right with that. Yeah. And I think that this is a good time to bring up that Indiana Jones has been insane from the start. The Lost Ark, the sequence where they open it in the original Indiana Jones movie is, I think, regardless of time travel, regardless of aliens or any of this stuff, I think it's still the craziest, most WTF out there thing in any of the movies. It confirms that God and Jesus are real, and that they are vengeful and will melt your face if you're disrespectful.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, dude.
And by disrespectful, you just look by
opening a box and having your eyes open, God will melt your face off. I don't. That's why I'm very like as bad as a lot of Crystal Skull was. I just cannot get down with the aliens are too weird for Indiana Jones argument. I just can't do it, and because I don't think they're ever going to get weirder than that first one. I mean,
I actually agree with you. I think maybe the line that people are towing, if you will, is that in the first, we'll say the original Indiana Jones trilogy, the movies, the MacGuffin or whatever is supernatural in nature, usually with a religious context. The religious context isn't important for this. but just as a note, it is supernatural. Whereas aliens and time travel are not supernatural; they are of a more science fiction element. So that's where I could see people drawing the line on that. I don't know why you would draw a line there. They're both fantastical elements. Well, no,
I can see it. I think with Crystal Skull, it was even like it wasn't even just the aliens. It was that it was such a confusing, nonsensical, like MacGuffin in general. Right?
It's explained really well in that review. It's like, what do they want the skull for? It's not expressed very well. If it's so important, why do they keep tossing it around in a bag and leaving it in a ditch? And
there's a sequence where it's like the psychic power on Indy. I was like, what? There's also psychic powers going on.
And then, when they get to the temple, that's also the ship. Like, what happens? Like, the thing is that there's a lot of that. The final act of Crystal Skull, where you're going, what is this now? Why is this happening?
Yeah,
and I never felt that way in this movie. I always felt like I knew what was going on.
True. And going back to just again to Crystal Skull, because we love talking about it, is in addition to it being an alien, right? If it was just straight up there was aliens, okay, all right, but it's an undead alien that like comes back to life with psychic powers.
But it's like different dimensions.
Yeah,
right? They're not even like space traveling; they're like dimension traveling.
Right.
They have that line. It's like what is going on? The other thing too, I think that maybe I don't know if so much separates it, but why I don't love just that MacGuffin and Crystal Skull is that it's not as historical based. I mean, they do tie it a little bit into the pre-Mesoamericans and stuff like that, but in general, the rest of these have a much stronger tie to the just like history and adventure and ancient like actual legends and stuff, and so I appreciate them more. I know that's kind of a personal thing. I don't know, you don't have to, but as someone's like, oh, this is loosely based on something that we know of, right? We all know the Holy Grail. That's something. Oh, that's cool. He's doing the Holy Grail. We know about that. Yeah. But obviously they make up everything, right?
I am inclined to disagree with that, though.
Okay.
Because I think that the Incan Mayan alien legend, I think it's plenty well known.
Is it?
Yeah, I think the idea of like, just the concept of like, how did ancient peoples build pyramids and these things? Oh, must have been aliens, which like I think is stupid, but I also think it's well known enough to
I just mean the Crystal Skull specifically.
Yeah.
Is the Crystal Skull a thing? More like an historical thing?
I've never heard of it.
It's based on stuff, so
okay.
But
I guess
maybe it's not well known as much as the Holy Grail.
I mean, to that point, I wasn't super aware of like Archimedes' dial either, so
right?
I guess,
yeah, and I didn't know if that was based on anything real or not either. If it is, cool, but I haven't heard about that. I could see the argument for it should be historical based, and it should be maybe something that's a little
and I'm not even saying it should be. I just think for me personally, that's what I generally like that more. Like I said, Temple of Doom. I don't know. I don't think those stones are historical. Maybe they are. I don't know. But it's not so much historical treasure hunt, and that's one reason I don't love Temple of Doom as much. But again, I still like Temple of Doom fine. I don't know what we're talking about anyways. But so anyways, the ending though, time travel in general, I think they did a good job where with all time travel stuff, right, you can't, you have to say the right amount when you're doing anything in time travel fiction. You can't say too much because then it makes us think too hard about it and wait, what? But you can't say too little because then it is just stupid and doesn't, it's like, what?
Then there's no rules, yeah. So I brought it up and I really liked the third act. It was, and that's the thing is like, you know that they're looking for a thing that has some time travel, so there's going to be some time travel shenanigans. And I think for me, that added to some of the, not boredom, but it's like, come on, get to the time travel stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I know that there's going to be crazy time travel.
I was half expecting them to not actually time, right? It's like, oh, they're going to get, the rift's going to open and then it's going to close before anything could happen, right? You know what I mean? Like, I was like, kind of had that sense like, oh, that's always what happens. They get right to the edge of this crazy thing and then they have to shut it down before it actually does anything. But that they went through the portal is like, oh my God, they're actually going through and they're actually doing the time travel.
And how awesome was it for Indiana Jones this legacy character to get to go back to ancient Greece and
and
see this like
there's definitely
historical
that element,
event
too.
and meet Archimedes. I think that it was just beautiful. I love that.
There are some little touches too, and I'm not like claiming this was some sort of brilliant filmmaking, but like when they're in Italy and there's the little puppet show going on, and there's the dragon coming, right? It's foreshadowing.
Yeah.
It's like doing little small things here and there. It's like, oh, okay, they're actually, again, this isn't bad. Like it's a movie. They're doing setups and payoffs. And it's not brilliant. I'm not gonna claim it's like, ooh, this is such brilliant filmmaking, but it was appreciated.
Well,
I love it. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say on the topic of setups and payoffs, I think one thing that was missing for me was at least understanding or knowing what Mad's plan was from the get-go. We didn't find out until the third act what his plan was, which was, on one hand, maybe kind of a cool reveal when we see his team all kitted out with Nazi paraphernalia.
Yeah.
So you're like, oh, wow, that's a bold plan. But I think it would have been better to know it ahead of time so we know what Indy's up against, what we know the threat he's trying to stop.
I can see that.
And that was an issue with Crystal Skull as well. Like, what does the skull do?
Right. What is its significance?
It's a magnet.
Yeah. And I think, and it brings further light and just kind of confusion to the idea of Mads has presumably been pursuing this artifact since 1944 or longer, because we see him in the prologue pursuing the dial. Yet, was he trying to travel into the past at that time as well?
Yeah, see, I heard you bring that up earlier in this conversation, and that doesn't bother me so much because there's a precedent for Nazis wanting mythical or magical items from the earlier in the series, and I don't feel like you need to explain how powerful time travel could be to Nazis. I feel like in general.
So you're just saying Mads is pursuing the Nazi agenda? Is that kind of what you're going for?
Yeah, I think back in the prologue, it's like why he wants it doesn't matter. He's not going to use it for good. So, but then like he comes back later in the 6th season, he has a motivation and is like, this is my plan for it. I didn't need there to be. I never wondered why does he want this thing in the prologue. It never crossed my mind. I just kind of like, oh yeah, it's a magical item. It's the name of the movie. The Nazis want it. Indiana Jones should probably stop the Nazis from getting it. Yeah,
I think so. Maybe this kind of dovetails a little bit with some of the criticism we were saying in general with the opening scene. I think that scene, and maybe would have even addressed this issue a little bit, because I like the train chase sequence, but it took so long for them to get there. He's in that building, he's getting strung up, and then and that's what I mean where I felt like they shortened that opening sequence to 15 minutes tops. And then you don't have to have a giant exposition dump about the device and trying to show how it's motivating the Nazis. You just have the very most base primal object Nazi want, me get, so they don't, right? And I think because we spend so much time in that opening, we are settling in and we're starting to ask these questions like, okay, what is this thing? Whereas in Raiders of the Lost Ark, do you know what he's even getting? What is that little statue? No one knows or cares. In Last Crusade, it's the cross of coronation. Why does he want it? Why do these guys want it? No one knows or cares. That's not the point. Because they're really short, little snippet adventures, funs. But when you spend 40 minutes on this giant MacGuffin chase, you're going to think more about that stuff and ask more of those questions. And I think you want to do that later in the film, but not right now.
I like in Temple. I like in Temple of Doom when he throws a flaming shish kebab at that guy.
Well, that was that was funny. Also, I was thinking on Raiders or on the it is funny because in Raiders he basically loses. The Nazis win unequivocally in that movie.
Oh yeah. He just knows to close his eyes.
Yeah, the only thing he does is he closes his eyes. That's the only reason he went. He walks away.
Yeah, I guess if Indy hadn't involved himself at all, they probably would not. They probably never would have.
They would all just die.
They probably never would have found the Ark in the first place. But had they, they would have just melted, and that would have been That's glorious to think about.
It was just much more apparent on this recent rewatch. Oh, you failed, and they just got exactly what they wanted, and that's obviously kind of telling too, because even in Crusade, there's that element too. It's less so, but he gets what he wants, right? He chose poorly. I do like in this one. This is the first one where he gets to keep the MacGuffin.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay.
That's kind of cool, I guess.
I guess it doesn't belong in a museum.
I guess not.
Yeah, as far as the we have to have this in the movie element of Crystal Skull, where it's just like they had a long checklist. I feel like instead in this one it was just, how many times can we get him to say it belongs in a museum?
It was weird. They kept saying it. It's like, yeah, we get what your
Also,
agenda is, man.
How many times can somebody hand him the whip and the hat? It was just those two fan services over and over again.
Yeah. I wish I actually, like I mentioned earlier, I did appreciate that they did not go over indulgent with fan servicey stuff, even though you just were saying they did those repeatedly, and yeah, that was silly. But they didn't call back unnecessary lines like, you want to get nuts? Let's get nuts for no reason. I'm not saying it's perfect. There are some things that I thought were silly, so the underwater scene in general, I thought was just kind of like, I can't even tell what's happening, and it's boring, and we all know what's going to happen, right, when they come out of water. But then they set up the eel, the eels are like snakes. It's like, what?
Yeah, they're just wet snakes.
I guess, but just the way it's delivered was so eye-rolly. And also they set it up literally right before he went down. It's not a setup payoff when you set something up 1 minute before the thing is being paid off. I don't know. Say eels earlier in the film where he's at a restaurant, they order eels, and he goes, ugh, I don't know, do a little...
as you say, we can't really tell what's happening. So is it like he got stuck because he's afraid to leave because he's surrounded by eels?
I don't know.
It would have been good once he resurfaced if he explained what was happening to Helena. Hey, you know what? Back there, I was real scared because they look like snakes. Oh, what's that? Everyone's dead? Oh.
I'm just an old man. I ramble a lot.
I kind of hope, going back a couple points, I kind of wanted Indy to stay in ancient Greece.
Well, I want to get to that because that is a big question I have for you guys. Do you want to talk about that now?
Yeah,
or?
Okay.
Yeah. So Matt, you're saying you wanted Indy to stay? I agree. I think he should have stayed. Or
I disagree. I like that he didn't stay. Both from a character perspective, just because I want Andy to be happy, and it would have been a very depressing ending.
What,
I feel.
You want him to be happy? That is what he wanted. That is what would have made him happy.
Okay, that's what he wanted. That's not what he needed, though, right?
I don't care what he needs.
But that's storytelling 101.
No. Storytelling 101. What kind of character is he? Is he a dynamic character? No. Indiana Jones is not a dynamic character. He's the kind of character that rides off into the sunset. He was denied his riding off into the sunset like an old adventure serial from which his character is based.
Yeah. So this is what my counter to that. So this is why I like that he came back. Because by him staying, I think there's a meta comment. I think there's a meta note here. And that is this idea that old adventure heroes serials belong in the past. I am a person, I belong in the past. I disagree, and I think the filmmakers disagree with that as well, and that's why I like that she's like, you could talk about, feminism and wokeness and all that kind of stuff. I think this film is actually saying, look, we need heroes. We need strong men. We need strong, adventurous types to be with us here in the present. We don't need toxic, awful jerks, idiots, but we need people like you, Indy. You don't belong in the past. We need you here in the present to help us be a part of this, you know what I mean? And so that's why I like that she brought him in the past. I know you want to live in the past and indulge and blah, blah, blah. But no, you don't think so, but you are needed here. And that's why I like that she brought him. That was my take.
Well, I just wanted him to stay in the past because the implication being he was going to die of his bullet wounds. And I just want them to not try to make another Indy with Harrison Ford again.
Well, they're not going to do that anyway.
I feel like I thought for a second, they're going to kill him off. And if they kill him off, this is a great way to do it.
I guess that's the other question. Would you have how would you have thought if they killed him off? Would you wanted him to die? Not wanted him to die, but if they killed him off, because I thought that was a possibility.
I really thought he was going to die. He was going to stay, and he was going to die in the past. I really thought that was where it was going. I was surprised and a little disappointed when, there was a moment where I was like, she's not going to let this happen, and it was a little disappointing. I would have liked that ending.
So here, I will say what I was disappointed at a little bit, and that is that when he comes back to the present, it is, I think it's, what's the word? It's too focused, or too centered around his relationship with Marion, and that being somehow the thing. Like, that's not what Indiana Jones. It's not a love story. Indiana Jones is not a love story.
No. And
so I was disappointed with that specifically. I agree, but him coming to the present, I wasn't. I like that he came back to the present.
Okay, so I want to touch on the points you made, because this is exactly why I'm here, is to talk about these final 10 minutes of the film.
Okay.
So, Sean, I like your perspective, and I definitely am taking a lot of meta context, or meaning out of this.
Mm.
But here's the thing. So I would agree with you had the movie established any of the points you're making. Like, I like the points you're making, and I agree with the points you're making, but the movie makes no effort to make them. You're making it for the movie.
I agree with that.
I mean, I don't disagree with that. I agree. I wish they did a better job of setting these things up or making it more apparent if these were the themes they were saying. Like, they were going. I think you could loosely, very, very broadly and loosely, and I don't even necessarily agree with all that, but like, oh, Helena is the strong woman character, and it's a little bit newer than like all that kind of stuff. I don't think it's as black and white as that, but I agree. In general, I wish they set more of this up for sure.
So Indy is needed in the present as a strong man, etc. But to me, the way I'm looking at it is he doesn't get any more adventures. This was his last adventure. They say that multiple times in the movie. One last adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Now he gets to sit on the couch and yearn for the past and think about what his final years might have been, living in the time periods that he loves most, that he's spent his entire life studying, beloving. In every other Indiana Jones movie, we see him being a professor, right, on that chalkboard, and he's talking to the dude about the thing, right? Yeah. We see that, and that's actually one scene I was hoping for. I love those scenes. Those are some of my funnest, best scenes in these movies. We see the passion he has for the past, for these time periods, and he was denied that. So, Sean, had Helena sat there on the beachfront of Sicily, or Syracuse, whatever, and explained those things to him, that you need to come back, and then he does so of his own accord, 100%. Instead, he was denied his free will by someone else. It doesn't matter who that person was or what their thing was. She forcibly extracts Indiana Jones and brings him to the present.
Yeah, what's he going to do now? Is he going to be in a retirement home? That's the same as putting him in a museum.
Well, he belongs.
He does not belong in the museum.
He
does not. Also, to say that we want him to have
him living in the past is he would be living in a museum.
Exactly. Which is theoretically his favorite place on the planet, in a museum, right?
No,
Indiana Jones loves museums. He's living in the past. He gets to live in a realized version of a museum.
He gets to live in the actual past, not just a facsimile of it.
Right.
Ryan, I could not have said it better. That is exactly what I was failing to express. That is why I wanted him to stay in the past. And yeah, Sean, I like your reading, but I agree with Ryan. I don't think the movie did the work, and I think maybe you might be projecting a little bit. Because possibly. Obviously. I guess I wish they did more stuff, but I don't think it's out of nowhere. Like, I don't think this is... The film is about him being old. That's not... I'm not reading into anything. That film is blatantly about him aging, and aging out of his prime years, right? So that's intrinsically part of this film, right?
Yeah.
And I think part of that story and part of that idea of those elements, or what does that mean? What is your places when you're old? Does that mean living the past, constantly living the past, or embracing who you are in the now and realizing that you could still be valuable who you are now, right? I guess that's what I'm saying was like a meta comment. To me, it reminds me of Luke from Last Jedi, right? He is not living in the past. He is having to partake or impart his knowledge onto the new generation. That is part of growing up. That is part of the human experience. And I think living in the past is an illusion, right? That's what people who want to just like nostalgic member berries. Why isn't it like this? Why isn't it like this? Why isn't it like this? This is how the old ones were. This is how the old ones were. This is how the old ones were. It's like, yes. And you could appreciate that. And you could love those. And you could put them in a museum. But that doesn't, I think it's doing a disservice to deny the present, to deny what we are now and what we can be. And again, obviously, I'm reading way, way more much into this because obviously this is not ever this so specifically. But I think the film is inextricably about this because he's a freaking old 80-year-old man.
So this is the next thing I wanted to talk about. So I'm glad you brought it up. The whole like member berries idea.
Yeah.
And I think in a large way, the antagonist of this movie is nostalgia. Mads wants to return to Nazi Germany at a time he perceives as a time that was better, right? He wants to return there because that's where he believes his time was better for him for whatever reasons. Indiana Jones, same way. He's now found him in a place where he wants to be. It's a time of the past, things gone. And I think the movie is saying that, the past is gone, like Sean, like you were saying. The past is gone.
Yeah.
Those things had their time, but your time is now. It's the present. Right? I think that's what you're saying. I think the movie is saying that to some degree, but at the same time, it also comes off as like almost not toxic isn't the right word, but it's certainly anti-boomer. That someone from the younger generation is denying them their reminiscence.
Well, I guess I guess what I'm saying is that living in the past is not reminiscence. There is one thing as remembering and having fond memories about something, but literally living in the past, being obsessed with the past, that you surround yourself by it and cannot exist outside of it, that's not reminiscing in my mind. You know what you get where I'm like?
No, I definitely see the distinction, and I agree with you, and just on a human level, right? Human beings, I absolutely 100% agree with you, but I don't think the movie makes that message clear.
Yeah, I agree with. I totally agree. I wish the film leaned heavier into that. I do think it is saying that. Maybe I'm reaching somewhat, but I do think something is there, and I think especially the middle part of the film, I wish they went into there was more, I don't know, motifs and other like ways that this was played and explored. The interesting thing about all of this though is I do want all this, and I do think this would have made a better film, but it's also interesting because it would have also made it less of an Indiana Jones film if they added, I feel, all of these layered, more metaphorical meanings to it. Not that the Indiana Jones films are just one surface level, but in general they are kind of, right? I mean, Last Crusade, there's definitely more layers there and meaning about obsession and blah, 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 blah. But in general, they're pretty... You know what you're getting when you watch the Indiana Jones films, right? There's not like some hidden meta commentary about, I don't know, whatever, Marxist theory so much or anything like that. I think this film has more of that than any of the other films, and in that way also goes to what we were talking about earlier. It separates itself from the other Indiana Jones films for that reason.
Yeah, 100% agree.
So in that way, it also kind of makes it weird. Like, I like this stuff, but it also makes it feel less Indiana Jones.
Right.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's like this weird... I mean, and this, to that point, there's a scene late in the film when, Indy's captured and they're flying back in time through the portal, and Helena is having to, like, run across the runway, and she's jumping into the landing gear and like, trying to... so she can rescue him. And this whole sequence, Indiana Jones just is sitting there. And the whole time I'm thinking, like... I know it's not he's an old man, but I want Indiana Jones being the hero. I want him to do that stuff. Like, not because he's a man and she's a woman, blah, 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 but just because he's the hero, right? It's Indiana Jones. I want him doing it. But it's indirect, but that clashes with an 80-year-old man. And so it's one of those also situations where it's like, this film also is just presented like, why are you making an adventure movie with an 80-year-old man?
Right.
Yeah. It definitely calls into those questions a few times, and it never more than during that plane scene where he's just like, he's just sitting there. Yeah. It's kind of depressing. It's he's not plotting an escape. He's just like, well, all right, let's see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And like to your point, like, he like, oh, you never thought of continental drift. So he's like, it's kind of trying to show him that he's like mentally sparring a little bit. I wish they went more, or there's something, because that felt very like, I don't know, ham-fisted, like, oh, this one thing, planets move too. They all are just warping out into the middle of space because the planets don't stay in the same place throughout the years.
Right.
I don't know. Anyways, but yeah, I don't know. And to that overall part, yes. To your point, Ryan, I agree. I do think the film should have set all this stuff up better. I still like the ending, but I get it if you wanted him to stay in the past. And maybe to that point, one thing that I wish they did that kind of adds this element of like a uncanny, not tragedy, but there's a point where Archimedes comes up to them when they're in the past and they have the dial and he has the dial. And for a second, I'm like, oh, they're going to do a causality loop. And, like they gave him the dial that he took and then he lost and they found it. And it's all, where did it begin? Like, I wish, but they ended up not doing that. It's just like, oh, I've already started building it. Oh, that's what it is. Okay. Yeah. But I wanted them to do a causality. They're like, oh, that would have been a cool little weird thing they threw in here.
I always appreciate causality.
Chew on that.
Love a good causality loop.
Movies, yeah, of course.
I kind of read it that way, though, because he's working on it. He's not done with it. I kind of read, like, oh, he dies with the watch. Which to me communicates that he used the watch to help him, like, finish his project. I don't know. Maybe that's just me projecting.
Sure.
The way a Hollywood movie would play this out is that because they, in the World War II plane, arrived in the past, the plane crashes into his workshop, destroying the Antikythera, and therefore he does not have it, and they realize, oh shoot, we destroyed yours, we must give you ours because you need to have it in order for us to find it. Yeah. That's how a Hollywood movie would normally have played this out. But Sean agreed. I wish they had. They would have been fun.
That would have been a lot of fun.
I think it just like adds that, like, it has the same feel of almost like the Ark getting stuck in a warehouse, right? It's like, it's obviously, oh, the heroes win and they beat the bad guys, but there's this element of like, I don't know, there's something that doesn't sit right? And a causality loop would have been a fun way to have a different twist on that, I think.
Thing,
just like, yeah, exactly.
No, I know what you mean about like the Ark being stuck in some warehouse. I love that ending because it's after this big adventure, he saves the day. It's so, I don't know, like humbling or something about it.
And even in Crusade as well, right? Like, oh, the Holy Grail is right there. We couldn't take it. No, it's like they're always kind of brought down a peg at the end.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that maybe would have been their way of achieving that same kind of little twist. I have a couple notes, just kind of like random odds and ends. We didn't really talk about the kid. He barely has a role in the movie. He's a fill-in for Short Round or whatever. But sure. Overall, I did like him. I wanted more from him. I think
I wanted something more, I don't know, significant. I felt like, I don't know what that means. I guess he does fly a plane at the end.
In terms right. I think what they were missing was building up of the relationship between him and Indiana Jones with a missed opportunity, and between Helen and Indiana Jones. I think it is I think a missed opportunity for like, well, why does he have a reason to return to the future? Oh, wait a minute. Maybe he's kind of building a new family here. Maybe that's what we're seeing. Yeah. Maybe that's, but we don't get that. Instead, the kid is just kind of there. I do have to mention this because I found it aggravating. The kid mentions, I don't, if you guys even remember this, that he can't swim.
I don't remember that at all.
He says, I cannot swim.
Oh, I believe
What do we see him? What do we see him doing later? Quite deftly.
Doesn't he drown a man by swimming and tying or locking his hand to a grate?
So he learns to swim pretty darn quick.
That was pretty brutal.
Is it when they're on the boat?
That was pretty rough.
Was it when he was on the boat when they were like diving?
Nope, it's like when they almost I think when they're about to get on the boat. He mentions it that he can't swim.
I don't remember that.
And it was a missed opportunity because we could have had a short little scene where it shows Antonio Banderas teaching the kid how to swim. Like while they're just kind of chilling on the boat, it shows them off to the side.
Oh, yeah.
Then we establish a connection between Antonio Banderas and the kid, and then when Antonio gets killed, it's definitely more impactful because as it is, why is Antonio Banderas in this movie? Like he's a
Yeah,
he's a cameo
yeah.
at best, except that he has a few too many speaking lines to. Is it a
Yeah,
cameo?
just be a cameo. I thought like that type of character is cool. I like those like types of characters, but I do think I wanted him to be a little bit more integral into actually, what happened. Like,
Right.
he could not have been there, and everything would have played out the same.
It's a small note, but it's like, why mention that the kid can't swim? Like,
Yeah.
why even mention it?
And then have him swim later.
Yeah, it's quite baffling. It just, yeah.
I had a couple more notes as well. So when I like the scene when they're kind of climbing up the rocks and he's really old and he's like, "What am I doing?" or whatever. And Phoebe Waller-Bridge's Helena's like, I don't know. There's a little line of dialogue, a couple of those sequences. But then like later, I think in the same sequence when they're exploring the ruins, there's just a scene with bugs on the walls, and it just felt so like, what? Why is like they didn't set it up? It wasn't like it meant anything at all. It's just like, here's 2 shots with a whole bunch of bugs. That's what's in Indiana Jones, bugs, for no rhyme or reason. I don't know. It just felt very.
Yeah, it's another
lazy.
It's another instance of a reference just to be a reference. There's not a setup. It's not a payoff. It's not clever.
I'm down for bugs in Indiana Jones. Who doesn't love bugs in Indiana Jones? But you got to do better than just having them there for no reason. Like, I don't know. It just like the sequence in Doom is great. Like they do, it's awesome. They set it so up, and I do at least appreciate that they were real, or at least they looked like actual bugs and not so CG, not like ants from Crystal Skull. But that kind of one of my last kind of big notes is the look of the film, and I touched upon this earlier. One, de-aging him, and honestly, at first when opens and he's on the Nazi sequence at the beginning, I was kind of like, oh, that's actually pretty good. But the more the sequence went on, it felt more and more uncanny and rubbery and all that stuff. That's another reason why I think that sequence was too long, because it just made me have to keep looking at de-aged Harrison Ford this whole time. But aside from that, I also think the film, and maybe it's just all films now look like this, it's too produced. It's too clean. If you go back and watch the originals again, it's so clear how much dirt is on Harrison Ford in every sequence. And you could tell how hot the things are, the vehicles and the sun, and just like everyone's sweaty in every film. They're just covered in sweat all the time, and it's just like there's so much grime and dirt in the film. It makes it feel there's a tactile element to those films, and they're completely lost. I think more so on Crystal Skull, but in this as well, where it feels too clean. And part of that, I think, too, is especially in the opening sequence, but a lot of the action sequence, there's too many close-ups. Give me more wides. Give me more mediums. I want to see Indy or Helena or whoever doing the actual cool adventure, cool thing. But there's so many like close-ups where I can't like tell. But like in the truck sequence in Raiders, right? Indiana, he's like climbing over, and then he's under the truck, and you have this nice medium shot of you can see the entire underbed of the truck of him coming underneath it, right? And he's climbing across the door, and you see the other Nazi climbing, like, you have a spatial awareness of these things. In Last Crusade, the take sequence is awesome. That sequence is so cool because you know exactly where people are and how they're moving, and he's riding the horse. There's so many wide shots of that stuff. In this, there's too many close-ups. Pan out. Give me a sense of like what is actually at stake. How are these people moving around each other? And there wasn't enough of that. And it's especially after watching them all right before this, that was the most obvious visual thing that stood out. And again, modern movies, I guess, that's just what they do and what they look like now. But I don't know. There's something about those gritty, obviously practical, someone's jumping from a truck in Raiders, right? That's what's happening. Or even in Doom, the little miniatures, the little puppets on the minecart tracks. Like, it's so like, yes, there's, that thing, and there's obviously some things that don't hold up entirely, some awful green screen per se. But anyways, that was definitely another thing that was not my favorite in this film. It was one of my biggest, criticisms.
Yeah, I don't have too much to say on that, but yeah, just the old man Harrison Ford voice coming out of young Harrison Ford's voice.
That was noticeable.
That wasn't
too.
good. And think about just the Last Crusade, they recast Harrison Ford to do the young role, right? That is a common thing to do in Hollywood. That's it makes sense. We can save all this money on CGI. And
if we just get a person,
we just get a human being that is capable of running and jumping fast and looking real when they're fighting, and doesn't have an old man voice. They did it in Crusade. I don't. Why are they not just doing that?
Yeah, people are going out of fashion. I mean, I was watching this movie, the opening, going, I don't know, a couple decades, Disney will make an Indiana Jones movie with an entirely de-aged or CGI reconstructed, because he won't be alive by then. They'll just make an entire.
I have had that thought too. Like, why? Like, that's conversations has either happened, right? And the question is, they're just like, no, their audience, we can't sell it, right? But it's gonna come a time where they're like, yeah, we're doing it. Yeah. Why would we not do it?
Yeah.
Right? It's just money.
And I feel like it wouldn't be that long before people would accept that. I mean, one of you were saying you don't want to be so cynical and thinking of this as just like a corporate cash grab, whatever. I do. Yeah. I'm going to call it that. I'm not going to say
on some level it definitely
I'm not going to say that the people who worked on it didn't have any artistic drive or anything like that. James Mangold being a good director and all that, but Disney bought Lucasfilm, which included Indiana Jones. They're like, well, shoot, we got to make an Indiana Jones movie before Harrison Ford gets too old, because otherwise we're not going to make any money off of this property that we own now. This gigantic IP.
Yeah, for sure. Like, if you own a property, what else are you going to do with it? You got to keep making it, right? Like,
and they knew that they needed to have Harrison Ford, but also maybe not, because nobody's seeing this movie.
It is kind of a bummer, because I might like it a little bit more than you guys, but in general, it sounds like we all think it's pretty decent. It's just a bummer it's bombing this bad. Yeah. Like, really? I don't think it's that. It's not that
and
bad.
That's the reason.
No, good.
I was just going to say, the reason I think it's such a bummer is because while I don't necessarily want more Indiana Jones specifically, like, I don't need a Harrison Ford doing the thing. I want more adventure movies. I love the genre of film. I love all these things, and it's sad that there isn't more of them. Heck, even the Uncharted movie, which was actually a play at, I mean, obviously the games are inspired by the movies, and the movie itself, while not that great, was still like, hey, at least we're getting an adventure movie, right?
Exactly.
That movie, Lost City, right, with Sandra Bullock.
Oh yeah, I think that did okay. That was a fun movie.
It doesn't, Romancing of the Stone, those kinds of movies. I love those kinds of movies. Adventure. You're off on some jungle. You're off in some foreign, and going through adventures. I want more of these things, and I don't think they need to be $300 million movies.
I think that you guys should watch, and this is a real recommendation, the live action Dora the Explorer movie.
Okay.
Did I know that they did?
Yeah. I don't know why Maeve and I one night decided to put that on, but it was such a refreshing, delightful, like, oh yeah, this is a fun little indie style adventure movie. Toned down a bit for family audiences. I neither one of us. Oh, I don't know about Maeve, but I'd never seen Dora the Explorer. But I had heard that it was well received, and we're like, what the heck? It's short. Let's watch this. and to your point, more adventure movies, please.
We are. It's crazy. Like, how are adventure movies not? Like, how are people not making it? Do people not want to go see adventure? That's like what you go to the movies for, right? I don't know. It's weird.
No, it's super weird. I'm gonna watch this, Matt. I just need to figure out what streaming service it's on.
Then there's new, and they're rebooting Tomb Raider again, so maybe those more adventure with Phoebe Waller-Bridge. She's doing it apparently.
Really? Okay. All right.
Yeah. And also, we didn't talk too much about her, but I thought she was. I liked her a lot. I liked her character. I liked the twist, on the Indiana Jones type, where she's coming kind of obviously more selfish, but her slight arc that she has, slight arc. But I don't know. I thought she was good. I liked her, and I still like Indy. He's still Indy. What else? I don't know. Not too many. Oh, I like the other chase sequence in Morocco. Those little golf cart things.
Mm-hmm.
Those are cool.
Yeah, that was fun. I think just in terms of pacing, like that was one scene for me. It was like, oh, this is quite enough now.
Yeah, well, it was also just like 2 car chases
right in a row
sequences, kind of. Yeah, and it was like I like what's happening, but I wish there was some more variety or something.
Yeah.
But it is, again, Indiana Jones is an 80-year-old man. He can only drive. What else are you going to do? Well, you could drive. Yeah. Make him drive somewhere.
That's true. That's a good point. That's a way to make him feel useful.
Yeah. Because that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're going to stroke his ego.
Yeah. I like the point when Indiana Jones punches Mads Mikkelsen in the face off the plane, and he says, "Get off my plane."
Yeah. Also, you mentioned the summary, but why did Mads Mikkelsen die, and then they not address that he
definitely died?
He definitely should have died when he got smacked in the head with a pole off of a train. What, like, if you're gonna do that, you have to address it in some way. Not he's fine.
Yeah, like they didn't even like give him a
scar. Give him a scar.
Yeah, give him a scar because that's a bad guy thing. And Indiana Jones just had to be like, "How are you alive?" And he goes, "Because I lived." I survived. I'm a survivor.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not gonna give up. That would have been fine. And I accepted it as is. I was like, well, we didn't see a body, so he's alive.
Whatever. It's fine. But it's like, it felt like very glaring hole that they don't even address it.
Yeah. Super glaring. I would have a little bit of script doctoring. I've already pitched to Sean, but just I think what they could have done just with the whole Antikythera Dial of Destiny is in the early chase scene, they are fighting. They're scuffling over the dial as they did. And it's broken in half at that time. Mads gets one half, Indy gets the other half. Indy knows he needs to go hide it and protect it and whatever. Mads instead uses the knowledge that he gains from dissecting it and understanding it to become the successful astronomer that he does become. Right? They establish in the movie that he somehow is
help the rocket program and the Apollo program.
Exactly. And we know that he used the Antikythera to do that. I mean, they tell us that, but Emily like, oh no, what? And then Indy realizes, oh God, what could he achieve if he had both halves? We need to, and then it becomes a chase for the second half or whatever the heck. It's just like a small little thing where it would have kind of connected those pieces.
I agree. And there was an element too. So like after they get the dial or the second part of the dial from the water, or the dive, and they come back up, and then she deciphers it for Mads, and then they escape, and then Indy realizes like, oh, it's hidden. That there's another secret message if I melt the wax here. Oh, so was that? Where did that first message tell them to go? Why did that? What like? Yeah. There's a little bit of confusion there. I was like, so that first message was all a lie completely, or was it part of the clue? Like there was a little bit of in that couple beats right in the middle there, where as much as these treasure hunt things are pretty straightforward, I was a little bit like, okay, I don't quite get what's happening here. Why I don't know. It wasn't that big.
Yeah, the whole sequence was quite peculiar because, they show Helena accurately decodes the tablet, which is not the dial, it's the tablet, right? It's the thing to get the other thing that gets the other thing. So she accurately decodes the message, although she's the only one that can read it. So why not just fabricate the whole thing? Especially if she was already planning on dynamiting the entire boat. Like, what? Just that whole sequence didn't work.
And they also, like, the way they describe it is like, oh, his final resting place. They had to piece the clues together, and then they found his body. But then his resting place was actually in this other random thing that the clues that pointed to the resting place had nothing to do with. I don't know. Like, it's not that big a deal. Whatever. Treasure hunt is fine, but there's a couple of beats there. Yeah. And maybe, who knows? Maybe on a rewatch, maybe I'll go, oh, I get it now, and maybe it doesn't make sense.
I think that bit was sloppy, but it wasn't detrimental for me. Yeah. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that whole sequence. I like the dynamite boat stuff.
Yeah, the sequence was fun. I agree. It was a fun sequence. I just, like, in terms of this, purely for the trail of the MacGuffin, I just was
could have been tighter.
Right.
Could have been a little
more. Yeah, it could have been tighter. I mean, I always enjoy a good little treasure hunt. Like, this thing points to that thing.
Yes.
Whatever. So it doesn't need to be perfect. It's just like as long as I can kind of at least sort of follow the thread and at least. I think actually the most important thing is for me kind of understanding my characters' motivations and why they're doing what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and because there was a lot of that muddled in with that whole sequence, I think that's kind of what conflated it all for me.
Yeah.
For me.
And this, you touched on something else that I did appreciate, although definitely something that I don't know if I wanted them to do more of or make more apparent what they're doing, but the idea of like the modern day Nazis. And I know you just, talking about, does it always have to be Nazis? And I agree. I don't know. So I always want Nazis, but I did like the idea that like, okay, well, they're not modern day, but Nazis in the 60s and stuff, they're not swastika wearing Nazis. They're Nazis that have integrated themselves in society. And there's, that's somewhat relevant. But beyond that, just the connections with the U.S. government and them helping him and the CIA agent, that character was interesting. And then she just gets murdered. Like, I thought some of that stuff was cool, but then it also just felt like, I guess it didn't really matter.
Yeah, and that was just because I liked her character. I was like, oh, what is she gonna like? She's an interesting kind of like curveball in the whole, what we would normally consider the typical cast of Indiana Jones characters. She definitely felt like an outlier. I was like, oh man, she's gonna stir the pot. Like she's gonna do something. She's gonna mix things up. And then she just is like unceremoniously murdered. And you're like, okay, I guess she's not in the movie anymore. Well, okay. Why was she in
just
here
showing
in the
that
first
the
place?
the bad guys are bad. Yeah, that showed more that the bad guys are awful. That
they murdered
was
plenty
effective.
of civilians.
I didn't that's true.
To further establish that.
So some of that stuff I liked the idea, but I just wish it just felt like they dropped it and it didn't really amount to too much in the long run.
Yeah.
So. Well, okay.
Oh no, Chewie. You're getting left the pass. Well, yeah, those are all my notes. So
that's pretty much all I got to.
Did we do it? Did we figure ourselves out? Did we come to some kind of realization?
I'm still generally, I liked it all right. I think I appreciate stuff that I wish they did more. Kind of what we were talking about, especially with a lot of the theming and stuff. I definitely I feel that lacking more after this discussion. But I still think it was a fun adventure movie that was good, not great, but I like you're saying, we don't need every movie to be $300 million, $70 billion at the box office, the only movie that ever existed. We could have these fun adventure movies, and they could just be fun adventure movies, and I think it was successful for that. So.
No, I didn't like this movie as much as I liked Shrek 4. But I do think that part of the box office bombing of this is that Crystal Skull did a lot of damage to the franchise, and just like how Shrek 3 completely damaged that series, I think that accounts for a lot of it. Also, just in general, people being more frugal about which movies they spend their money on and go out of their way to see in theaters, and how unfortunately it seems like movie theaters are they're losing their luster for most people, maybe on their way out, hopefully not. I love seeing movies in the theater, but yeah, I think the series just kind of had more bad will than Disney was maybe planning on, and this movie needed to be better than it was for it to generate the good word of mouth that would have gotten it where they wanted it to.
Yeah.
I feel like if they'd hit it out of the park, people would talk about it over,
have legs.
Yeah, but it just wasn't quite good enough. That being said, I liked it. I would recommend watching it. But temper your expectations. It's still Indiana Jones. It's still kind of a cookie cutter plot. It's just a fun, well-made movie, and that's fine. It is what it is.
Yeah. I echo those sentiments. Overall, positive experience. Go see it. Overall, I will say I do feel left unsatisfied, I think is the word I'm going to use, even though I think it is a well-made movie, just in general. I agree. Crystal Skull left kind of bad taste in everyone's mouths. Although, for as bad as that movie is, I think it's sometimes those bad things that make me remember them more and stick out in my mind. This one, other than it being the final Indiana Jones movie, it's gonna fade in my memory as I fade in age. And,
Yeah, just like Shrek 4. It's the movie that not a lot of people saw and should because it's pretty good, but it's gonna probably be lost to time. Ironically, the time travel Indiana Jones movie will be lost to time, I fear. Yeah. And, when it shows up on Disney Plus, give it a watch. If you're one of those people.
Yeah.
And,
I think that's a good way to
have a nice little Friday evening at home. Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, that's how we feel about that. And I don't believe we have any email or comments this week.
Nope.
Not this week. Okay. Also, I never made the YouTube version of our last episode, 122, which was about the movie Elemental. So if you're a YouTube listener, go check that one out. I will be uploading this and the Elemental review to YouTube simultaneously. So go check that one out. I wasn't on it, so I don't know what you guys all thought about the movie, and I haven't.
You haven't
seen it either, yeah. So I don't know what I thought about the movie. I don't know that I ever will. So take that for what you will.
Well, actually, we just talked about Shrek 4 that entire episode.
Oh, dang, man.
You missed out.
I have a lot of...
stay tuned, listeners, for our next episode, Shrek 4.
I have a lot to say about that movie.
What is our next episode? We're probably going to do...
Well, both of you go see Dora and the Lost City of Gold, and we'll review Dora and the Lost City of Gold. I'm only a little bit kidding. We've got... I'm gonna be tied up on a production. I'm gonna be a follow spot operator on a production of Tarzan the Musical for the next for the next several weeks. So I might be sitting out a few episodes, but you guys got Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1.
Oh yeah,
you got
I'm excited for that.
You got Oppenheimer, and most importantly, you got Barbie.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to all three of those. In fact.
Yeah.
By the way, I was going to ask you, Tarzan. Does it have the music of Phil Collins?
Absolutely.
Oh, baby.
Ooh. But the characters don't sing it.
Well, maybe they do in this. I don't know. I have never seen never seen the stage adaptation, so I don't know how this is going to work.
Yeah, is the music diegetic in the stage adaptation? Because the animated. Why aren't the characters sing all the Disney animated films? The characters sing the music.
Yeah.
Except Tarzan. Why don't they sing in Tarzan?
So what you're saying is that Phil Collins should have voiced Tarzan.
No. Yes? Phil Collins should have just been a character in the movie Tarzan.
Or Phil Collins should have been a character.
Yes.
He should have been Jane or the hunter or something. But sometimes they get different character or actors to sing for like Jonathan David Thomas didn't sing.
Yeah. Well,
guy.
Anyway, that is to say, I probably won't be in the next few episodes, but maybe, who knows? I'll be in a guest starring capacity for the next month. But yeah, there's some good stuff coming down the pipeline, so stay tuned for that stuff. And until then, it's time to dial it back and take your hat off and put it on that little hook on your balcony so the little Porky Pig circle can zoom in on it. And that's all, folks. Pork chop sandwiches.
We'll get this episode up. We got top men working on it.
Top men.
Is also that actor? Is that Jack Porkins? I've always wondered that.
From Star Wars? Porkins?
Yeah. Porkins. Is Porkins the guy in Raiders who comes to Indy with the Raiders quest and then at the end says top man?
I don't know.
I know I could look it up, but
Porkins?
I'm not going to.
That's so mean.
It's a family name.
Yeah, I think that's his family name.
Corellia has a long line of noble Porkins.
over here.
I don't
Get
know.
Why
over
did they
here.
name him
Porkins is from
Solo?
Corellia.
Get over here,
Thank-
Porkins.
Star Wars
Thank,
fans.
thank God we
correct
have an
me.
answer to that. Where's
Yeah.
the Porkins backstory?
Porkins, a Star Wars story.
he enlists the rebel, and they go, "What's your name, Jack? Where are you from?" And he doesn't have an answer. But then the rebel, officer checking him in, sees he's holding a pig. It's because Jack
No,
Porkins,
Sean.
a Star
Yes,
Wars
you're a fat
story.
guy. I'm gonna call you Porkins. How's that sound, huh? You like that? Little
It's
little
as
porky
it's
boy.
as good as Solo. Recognizing Solo, his name.
Anyway, time to lock
Anyways,
this into the,
bye,
the
listeners.
crate and
Yes.
haul it into Area 51, I guess.
There we go.
Good time, everybody. Bye, and eat your vegetables. Hydrate. Say your prayers. Eat.
Bad dates.
No, I
see?
get, yeah,
Lines.
Okay. What?
This has been
After the credits.
a YumChunks podcast.
Are we stopped? Have we stopped?
I
Have we stopped this?
don't know. This is my last free night for a long time, and this is what I'm doing with it.
You're spreading joy.
No.
to the world.
Do not delude yourself into. All right.